Hey guys, tonight, we journey to the edge of the known world, or at least the edge of what medieval Norse folks thought was the known world. We're going to Greenland, but not the icy, silent version you see in documentaries with modern scientists poking glaciers. No, this is 10th century Greenland. The kind of Greenland where smoke curls from turf-roofed longhouses, where sheep bleat in the distance, and where every gust of wind makes you clutch your cloak a little tighter. Because it's cold, and remote, and beautiful, and slowly, quietly, on the verge of something strange. You're here with the Norse settlers. Vikings, yes, but not the raiding, burning kind. These are the ones who brought their families, their livestock, their holy books, and their wild sense of optimism to a place that definitely didn't ask for any of it. They built lives here, real lives, for centuries. You probably won't survive this. Honestly, even if you do manage to grow barley in a glacier's shadow and herd sheep without a single fleece, turning into a popsicle, there's still trade collapse, political neglect, and a minor thing called the Little Ice Age coming for you. So, good luck. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, if you're listening right now, I'd love to know where in the world are you tuning in from, and what time is it there? Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. It begins with a voyage. You stand at the prow of a creaking ship, or salt in your nose, cold in your bones, watching Greenland's jagged coast emerge from the mist, like a secret being reluctantly shared. You're following Eric the Red, or at least his legend. Banished from Iceland for, well, let's call them axe-related misunderstandings. Eric sails west and finds this massive frostbitten wilderness. In true real estate fashion, he names it Greenland to make it sound inviting. You squint at the glaciers. Questionable branding. Still, it works. In 985, a fleet of 25 ships sets out from Iceland. 14 arrive. The others vanish, likely claimed by Storm's icebergs, or the sheer hubris of sailing into the Arctic with wool cloaks and wooden planks. Those who survive anchor at two spots along the southwestern coast, what we now call the Eastern Settlement and the Western Settlement. They're not cities, just clusters of turf-roofed farmsteads tucked into sheltered fjords. You climb the slope above the Eastern Settlement and look down. It's surprisingly green in summer, grassy valleys, low hills, and patches of scrub. Sheep graze. Children chase goats. Men cut peat for fires. It's hard, yes, but there's warmth here. Community. And an odd optimism. The Norse settlers bring more than livestock and tools. They bring memory. They carve churches, plant herbs, build homes with curved walls to weather the wind. They write nothing down, not really, but their lives stitch themselves into the landscape. You help raise a barn stacking sod bricks and hammering pegs. You learn quickly that cozy means a ceiling low enough to headbutt and a bed stuffed with hay that might be sharing space with a vole. But you settle. You adapt. Everyone does. There's no coin economy here. No marketplaces. Trade is barter-based and deeply seasonal. You salt a few sealskins and store them under rock. Next summer, a ship might come, and with it, the chance to trade for iron tools or a single treasured needle. For now, you focus on what you can control, keeping the sheep alive through winter drying fish before the first frost, and praying the summer sun lasts long enough to grow barley for beer. Because yes, even in Greenland they brewed. Historians still argue whether these settlers truly understood what they were getting into. Some say they believed Greenland would become the new Iceland, a fertile northern paradise. Others think they knew the risks, but came anyway, outlaws and second sons with nothing to lose. One theory even claims they were searching for Vinland, but turned right too early. Oops. You attend your first thing, a gathering of households. Everyone's wrapped in thick wool cloaks, smelling faintly of cheese and old smoke. Disputes are settled. Marriages arranged, trade tallied. Someone's sheep wandered into the wrong field again. You swear there's always one. And then winter comes, and oh, does it come. The snow doesn't arrive gently. It punches you straight in the teeth. The sun slips behind the horizon and stays there, turning days into twilight. The fjords freeze. The goats grumble. You huddle in the longhouse, listening to the wind scrape across the roof like the claws of something very large and very cold. And still life continues. You patch your boots with sealskin. You swap stories by firelight. You try not to eat all the cheese in 1 month. You learn that hope here comes in small forms. A lamb born healthy, a chimney that doesn't smoke too much, a letter from Iceland delivered on brittle parchment and tucked inside a fur-wrapped pouch. One night, someone tells a story about how the settlers brought bees from Iceland, but the hives never took. Too cold. Too far. The bees died. No honey. Just wax. You sip warm milk and wonder if the same fate awaits the people here, busy building, buzzing, but doomed. But not yet. For now you drift to sleep beneath the turf roof, the sounds of sheep shifting in the dark, and the faint creaky promise that spring might return. Spring doesn't so much arrive as it apologizes. It peeks out timidly from beneath the snowdrifts and says, "Hey, sorry about all that." You emerge from your longhouse, blinking into a sky that finally remembers how to be blue. The ice in the fjord groans as it starts to crack apart. And for the first time in months, you can see grass. Sort of. It's more of a suggestion of green than a confident declaration. You stretch your legs and sniff the air. It smells like wet stone, thawed sheep, and whatever is growing in that old pot near the back door. It might have once been cabbage. It might now be sentient. But who has time to worry about undead vegetables? The growing season is short, frantically, heartbreakingly short. You have about 10 weeks to plant wheat harvest and pretend that you're not just gambling with the weather. Every potato you bury is a whispered wish. Every barley seed is a prayer hurled at the sun. You work beside your neighbors in the small uneven fields above the fjord. The soil is rocky and thin, reluctant to grow anything other than lichen and low expectations. You use tools inherited from your grandfather, sharpened so many times the handles now feel like extensions of your palms. The children scare off the birds. The dogs chase the children. The sheep chase no one. They just chew and judge. But the rhythm returns. Daylight stretches, food stores grow, and with the snow gone, so does your sense of hopeless isolation. Boats arrive again sometimes, and when they do, they bring rumors as much as goods. News from Iceland, from Norway, from the Holy Roman Empire if you believe the merchant with the crooked hat, who swears he saw an elephant once. And they bring priests. Christianity had already reached Greenland with Eric the Red's son, Leif Erikson, who went the other way west and found something wilder than even Greenland. But here in your settlement, faith is more than fire and brimstone sermons. It's woven into the routine. A tiny wooden church perches on the hill, its beams creaking in the wind. You kneel inside it each Sunday, your breath rising in puffs as the priest chants in Latin and sheep baa faintly in the distance. The church isn't just spiritual, it's social. Weddings happen here, baptisms, occasional trials, and eventually burials. You've been to a few? Always simple, always windy. You wonder sometimes whether the wind ever really stops here, or if it's just practicing to carry off the whole settlement one day. Still, it's not a sad place. You see joy in small things. A calf born without frostbite. A ribbon traded for a song. The annual summer gathering, where someone inevitably drinks too much homebrew and falls into the peat pile. You help build a new cowshed. You tend the flax. You hang fish to dry in tidy rows that smell like ambition and regret. There's a system to it all, and you follow it faithfully, because in this place, tradition is survival. Historians still argue whether the Greenland Norse innovated or just adapted. Some evidence suggests they clung to old ways, refusing to fish like the Inuit or dress in furs beyond a certain point of dignity. Others say they learned what they could, borrowed what they must, and forged ahead. One theory insists they even traded with North American peoples far more often than the sagas admit. But the truth, like so much in Greenland, is buried under frost and time. One evening, you visit a neighbor who's weaving. Her loom takes up half the room, its threads like a harp waiting for a storm to play it. She's making sailcloth, not for any ship currently in port, but because one might come. Hope woven one row at a time. The wool comes from your own sheep. You sheared them awkwardly last month, apologizing the whole time. They forgive you. Mostly. You think the spotted one still holds a grudge. She keeps trying to bite your boot. Summer hits hard and fast, like someone opened the sun too far and forgot to close it again. Days stretch nearly to midnight. You can almost feel the land holding its breath, soaking up every ray in a desperate push to produce enough for winter. The sheep are sleek. The hay piles grow. And you can smell the difference in the air, less wood smoke, more possibility. But there's always something beneath the joy. A hush, a caution. You all remember last year's failed barley crop, the year before's sickness. That time the fjords stayed frozen until June. You laugh, you dance, you raise mugs of weak ale, but always with one eye on the horizon. Because nothing lasts forever. One night you step outside and see a glow low on the northern horizon. Not fire, not moonlight. Something stranger. A shimmer? The aurora, maybe. You've seen it before, but tonight it seems more urgent. The old man down the path calls it the spirits whispering through the sky. You wrap your cloak tighter and say nothing. The light flickers. Your sheep rustle. Somewhere a baby cries. Then all is still. You head back inside. The turf roof sighs under the weight of the sky. Your family sleeps around you, bundled in wool, dreaming of things that never melt. And you wonder just for a moment if the world beyond Greenland remembers you exist. Or if it ever really knew in the first place. You wake to wind. Not the sharp, familiar kind that slices off the fjord, but something heavier. More insistent. It rattles the shutters, sighs down the chimney, and makes the hanging fish on the porch tap against the wall like a clumsy Morse code. You blink in the half-light and pull the wool blanket higher. It's colder than it should be, colder than it used to be. The seasons are shifting, not in the poetic harvest festival sort of way, in the quiet creeping way that doesn't announce itself until the ice doesn't melt and the lambs don't fatten and the sea stops bringing in enough cod. You've started measuring the world, not by hours or days, but by what doesn't happen, what doesn't grow. Your breath fogs the air as you move about the house, fingers numb even inside. The fire takes longer to catch. The turf bricks are damp. You mutter under your breath and pretend this is just a bad morning. But it's not. It's a pattern. The sheep bleat anxiously when you step outside. They know too. The grass is shorter than it should be. The fjord has a thin crust of ice around the edges already. You pause. You frown. You consider saying something to your neighbor, then decide not to. He'll just shrug. He always shrugs. You think about the years when things were better. When Eric the Red arrived, Greenland was relatively speaking a Greenland. Not lush exactly, but hospitable enough in its southern reaches. Pastures rolled down to the sea. Driftwood washed up in usable lengths. The sun lingered just long enough to pretend you were more than a stubborn colony at the edge of the map. And for a while it worked. Historians still argue whether the climate shift you now feel was part of a little ice age or a series of unlucky cold snaps. Some suggest volcanic activity dimmed the sun with dust. Others blame solar cycles, ocean currents, or, as the local priest once muttered, during a hard winter, divine irritation. Whatever the reason, the change is real. And it's getting worse. The hay harvests come in thinner. The sheep leaner. You start drying seaweed to add to their winter feed. You try to hunt more caribou inland, but they're harder to find, spooked and scarce. And always there's the ice. Ice that forms earlier. Ice that stays longer. Ice that begins to pinch the shipping lanes closed. Because that's the other thing, fewer ships. When you were younger, they came every summer. Traders from Iceland. Occasional Norwegians. A bishop once his beard crusted with salt and sanctity. They brought goods, iron nails, beeswax winecloth news. In exchange, you gave them walrus tusks, seal skins, narwhal horns passed off as unicorn relics. It worked for a while. But the ships don't come as often now. You hear rumors whispered from one longhouse to another that Norway is busy, distracted, stretched too thin across too many oceans, that the church has stopped caring so much about this far-flung outpost, that the trade routes are shifting westward to new lands, richer lands. America, maybe, though no one calls it that yet. You try not to think about it. Instead, you mend your nets. You check the sheep. You help patch a neighbor's roof with sod and prayer. And you wait for the sun to return. One morning, a young boy finds a dead seal frozen into the shoreline. Not fresh, not useful, just there. You all gather around, poking it with sticks as if it might explain something. It doesn't. It just stares up with glazed eyes like it too is wondering what's gone wrong. Later, you go out fishing in a half-frozen inlet. The wind bites. The lines tangle. You catch a single shivering cod and bring it back like treasure. That night it's boiled with roots and shared among 7 people. No one complains. There's still hope. Sort of. You plant early when you can. You conserve. You barter more. And some days are still golden briefly. When the sun hits the hillside just right and the sheep all lie down like content loaves of bread, you remember why you stay. And then the snow returns before it should. Your tools freeze. Your roof leaks. The sea hisses against its own skin. You wrap yourself in every layer you own and hunker down. Inside, you tell stories to pass the time. Tales of Vinland, of Eric the Red, of Leif's westward voyage. You wonder aloud what might have happened if they'd stayed. If someone had gone back? If there's still a cabin there somewhere under leaves and moss waiting. One evening, the priest delivers a sermon about fortitude, about Job, about winter being a test. You nod. Everyone nods. It's easier than asking the hard questions. You fall asleep that night, listening to the creak of the rafters and the distant groan of sea ice forming thicker than before. You dream of warmth of wood. You don't have to burn sparingly, of summers that last longer than a sigh. And when you wake, the ice hasn't moved. The cod haven't come. And the wind has brought nothing but silence. You pull your cloak tighter as you trudge down the slope toward the small wooden church, its pitched roof already crusted in frost, even though it's barely autumn. Your boots crunch over dry grass that should still be green, and as you pass the stream, you see it slower. Shallower. Not frozen yet, but sullen. This is Sunday, and despite the cold, despite the hunger nipping like a persistent dog, you're expected at Mass. Not just for faith, but for news, for presence, for solidarity. Inside, the pews are full. Woolen shoulders pressed close. Heads bowed, not always in prayer. The priest begins his sermon something about endurance again. He doesn't mention the ships. He doesn't mention the famine. He doesn't have to. The silence between his words does it for him. You glance around. Fewer faces than last time. Old Bjorn is missing dead or too sick to climb the hill. 2 families from the western settlement haven't come in months, and Sigrid the midwife eyes the rows with a narrowed brow as if counting the absences in her head. You try to listen, but your stomach growls. Afterwards, people linger longer than usual in the cold. They're reluctant to leave, as if proximity might ward off the creeping decline. You catch scraps of conversation. Someone's goat wandered into a crevasse and didn't come out. Someone else's son hasn't returned from a trip to the edge of the ice shelf. A few mutter about the Skraelings. Ah, yes, the Skraelings. The word means different things to different people. In stories, they're enemies. Others speak of trades. Fish for tools, furs for metal. But lately the tales have turned darker. A hunter says he saw smoke rising from a distant hill and found a hut burned out, nothing left but char and footprints heading north. Another claims he heard drums slow rhythmic, not wind, not sea. Historians still argue whether Norse contact with indigenous Greenlanders, likely the Thule ancestors of modern Inuit, was mostly peaceful or mostly tense. Some sagas hint at cooperation. Others tell of sudden violence. You don't know which version is true? Maybe both. Maybe neither. You return home uneasy. That night over thin stew, your eldest cousin mutters something about heading inland. Building a new shelter? Hunting further afield. You point out that it's dangerous, that the snow will come early, that the spirits of the land grow impatient with trespass. He shrugs. Better than starving. You can't argue. In the weeks that follow, a small group breaks off, packs up what they can, leaves behind the stone walls they spent decades building, heads for the valleys and the game trails. You help them load their cart. You wave. You don't say goodbye, because part of you wonders if you'll be joining them soon. The harvest fails again. You don't even pretend this time. The fields are bare. The grass that fed the sheep has yellowed to bone. You barter your last bit of cloth for fish that barely smells safe. You dig into your stores, then into your neighbor's charity, then into nothing. One morning your younger brother doesn't rise. You think he's sleeping. He isn't. You bury him in a shallow grave too hard-packed to dig properly. The priest says the right words. You say nothing, because what is there to say in the absence of hope? Routine returns. You patch roofs, mend nets, scrub clothes so stiff from salt they could walk on their own. You do not make soap anymore. That's a luxury. You wash with sand and snow. Sometimes just scrape and pretend. Then one evening, a ship is spotted offshore. You run. Everyone does. Down to the shore, slipping on rocks, slick with ice. You squint into the dusk. Yes, a sail. A proper sail. It's smaller than the old trading vessels. Newer somehow. Sleeker. But it's real. The whole village stands like statues, breath caught. Then cheers erupt. Someone dances. A girl weeps. But the ship doesn't land. It stays offshore for an hour, then turns. No message. No barrels dropped. No visitors. Just gone. Back to wherever it came from. That night the village is quieter than usual. Even the dogs lie still, ears flat. You wonder if the ship was real. If it was just the wind shaping waves and memory into something merciful or cruel. The priest says it's a test. A reminder not to stray from the path of righteousness. You think it was just a ship that didn't stop. You begin to wonder if you'll leave too. Not today, but soon. Historians still argue whether the Norse of Greenland gave up slowly through decades of decay or all at once, whether they migrated back to Iceland or further west, or simply vanished. But right now, you're just trying to sleep. The walls creak around you. The wind moans like an old woman. And outside in the darkness, something cracks. Maybe ice. Maybe something else. You pull the furs over your head and try not to listen. You wake to cold. Not the kind that stings your skin and makes you curse the morning, but something deeper. A chill that has worked its way through stone walls and wool blankets and now curls along your spine like a whisper of something forgotten. You sit up slowly, blanket tangled at your waist. and listen. The silence is different today. You're used to quiet out here in the Western settlement, especially in the dead of the year. But this is heavier, the kind of quiet that settles in when something's missing. You rise boots, stiff from frost, and push open the door. The air bites immediately dry and sharp. The sky is a blank canvas white, where it meets the snowline gray further up. The goats are still there good, but the smoke from your neighbor's chimney is absent. You squint. No one is outside. No footpaths in the snow. No clatter of buckets. Just the wind. You wrap your cloak tight and head toward the edge of the village. You knock on the first door. No answer. You try another. Empty. You try the church. And that's when you find it. The altar is untouched, but the pews are scattered, one knocked over the others, tilted at odd angles. On the floor, a single shoe, small still laced. A basket of herbs abandoned on a bench. No signs of violence, no blood, just absence. Historians still argue whether the Western settlement was wiped out by disease conflict or slow attrition. The records are vague. The graves are few. The silence, however, is loud. You search the other homes. Some still have fires burning pots on hearths. Food half prepared. It's as if they left mid-task. Like someone rang a bell and everyone walked out in unison. You're not religious, but even you say a prayer that night? The priest, who was always a bit too fond of fermented milk, says it's the day of reckoning, that God has called the faithless. You disagree, mostly because you're still here. You sleep lightly, one hand on a knife, just in case. Over the next few days, the remaining families from your own hamlet tighten the circle. Meals are shared, beds too. There's comfort in breathing near someone else. And yet, you all feel it. That tingle in the chest, that whisper of change. The sea ices early, a full month before expected, which means no hunting ships, no seal blubber deliveries, no late-sent traders from Iceland bearing cloth and salt. You mark the date in charcoal on the doorpost. You try not to stare at it. Then come the lights. At first, you think it's moonlight playing tricks. Then you realize the moon's new. The sky is supposed to be black, but out over the hills, something glows. Not fire, not aurora, just a slow pulsing haze, faintly blue. You watch it with your cousin, who finally mutters, "Foxfire." That's his answer for everything strange. Lightning from beneath the snow. Spirits of the dead. Foxfire. You want to believe it? The next morning, another house is empty. You wonder if you should run. But where the sea is blocked, the ice too thin to cross, the inland trail is too dangerous this late in the season, and the Western settlement, as far as you know, no longer exists. So, you stay. And so does the dread. Food grows thinner. You begin grinding bark into your flour. You boil leather scraps into soup. You try not to notice your aunt has stopped eating altogether. One day while chopping firewood, you spot something strange. A figure on the horizon. Alone. Not approaching. Not retreating. Just standing, just watching. You blink. Gone. You don't tell anyone. Not because you're afraid, but because you're not entirely sure it didn't come from inside your head. Later that week, the storm comes, and with it, the last horse dies. You bury it. Not out of respect, but because the stench draws wolves. The pit is shallow, the ground too hard. Still you manage. By this point, only 5 homes remain with smoke curling from the chimneys. Yours is one, and it creaks more each night. One evening, as you sort through a basket of cracked pottery, you find something strange, an amulet. Not Norse, not even remotely familiar. Bone, carved with symbols that make your skin prickle. You ask the others. No one has seen it before. No one wants to touch it. You toss it into the fire. It does not burn. You stop sleeping well. One morning you walk to the old trade path, just to look, just to see. And there pressed into the snow are footprints, bare, human-shaped, headed inland. You look back at your home, the sagging roof, the too small pile of wood, the too long silence, and you start walking. Historians still argue whether individuals migrated quietly into indigenous communities. There's archaeological evidence of cross-cultural exchange, tools, bones, stories that blend Norse and Inuit gods, but it's debated, as it always is. All you know is the cold doesn't sting as badly now. Maybe because you're moving, or maybe because you've grown numb. You follow the tracks not knowing where they lead. Maybe to others, maybe to safety, or maybe just maybe to a kind of forgetting. Because forgetting hurts less than remembering. The tracks vanish just before sunrise. 1 minute, they're crisp divots in the snow-dark shadows under the hush of moonlight. The next, they're gone, swallowed by frost, or wind, or something older. You kneel and brush your hand across the snow as if you can coax them back with your fingertips. But the path is silent. Still, you don't turn around. Behind you is the settlement, what's left of it, and all its empty spaces. The abandoned halls, the fireless hearths, the echo of people who didn't say goodbye. Whatever's ahead might be worse, but at least it's forward. The morning stretches thin pink and pale across the sky. You travel along the ridgeline where the snow crusts harder and your boots don't sink so deep. Below the sea lies frozen a slab of silence stretching toward the black teeth of the cliffs. By noon, you stumble upon a ring of stones. They're too deliberate to be natural. Set knee-high in a perfect circle, half buried in snow. Some have marks runes maybe. One is scorched, one smells faintly of fish. You crouch beside them and rest your hand on the nearest. It's warm, just barely. You pretend not to notice. Instead, you press on. You're hungry. Your last bit of dried fish is long gone. You chew bark now, and when that runs out, you chew nothing at all, just clench your jaw and pretend. Hunger does strange things. It shortens your temper. It lengthens your dreams. You dream of bread, of snow made of milk, of hot stones wrapped in cloth and tucked between your ribs. But the oddest thing of all is what you begin to remember. Not your own memories, but fragments of someone else's. You hum songs you never learned. You whisper names you've never heard before. You know which cave near the fjord is good for shelter, though. You've never walked that far. It's like something inside you is reaching back or being reached for. Historians still argue whether Norse memory was passed down through oral sagas alone, or whether cultural habits, rituals, gestures, even instincts were etched deeper, carved into the marrow by repetition and need. Maybe you're just hungry, or maybe your ancestors are closer than you think. By dusk, the weather turns. Snow comes fast, sideways, biting like sand in the wind. You wrap your cloak tighter and trudge into the storm. No shelter in sight, no trail to follow, just white on white on white. The horizon eats itself. You find shelter by accident, a hollow between rocks, deep enough to curl into. You crawl inside like an animal and tuck your knees to your chest. Your breath fogs in front of you. The snow piles against the entrance, and then you sleep. You wake to quiet again, but not the same as before. This quiet is full. Something moved the snow from the entrance. Something lit a small fire just outside, and next to the fire, a figure sits, bundled in thick furs, face painted in soot, eyes catching the flame. You blink, unsure whether they're real. You say nothing. Neither do they. Instead, they hand you something. Warm. Smells of fish and fat and bone. You eat it without asking what it is. Later, you try to speak, to thank them. But they hold up a hand, not in warning, but in invitation. Not now. Just eat. Just breathe. And for the first time in days you do. When the storm lifts, they rise and motion for you to follow. You do. You walk together in silence. Sometimes you glimpse their face beneath the hood, young maybe, or ageless. You're not sure. They speak a few words now and then, not Norse but close. Like your tongue knows the shape, but not the meaning. You nod anyway. You come to a place nestled in the cliffs. Houses, but not like yours. Built of stone and turf, low and clever. Smoke curls from one. You're ushered inside, given more food. A place to sleep. The walls are painted with ochre spirals. The floors are covered in woven mats. There are bones hanging from the ceiling, not ominous. Just decorative. You're not questioned. You're not feared. You're just another body against the cold. Later, when the snow melts, you help mend a sealskin tent. You learn to scrape fish with a bone knife. You hum a tune, and someone hums it back. A child hands you a carved toy and doesn't flinch when your cold fingers touch theirs. You're still Norse, but something's softening, shifting. The old gods don't leave exactly, but they make room. You carve a new cross out of driftwood, one with rounder edges, one that fits into your palm like it belongs. Historians still argue whether the Norse merged with the Thule people, Greenland's ancestral Inuit, or simply disappeared. Some bones suggest mixing, some don't. But bones can't hum. Bones can't share soup or stories. Bones can't tell you when someone stopped being other. You stay for a season, then another. You don't keep track anymore. But one day, while pulling in a net of fish, you glance across the ridge and see smoke thin, curling familiar. Someone else survived. Maybe even someone you knew. You say nothing. You just watch. Then you turn back to your net hands, wet chest full. Maybe this is what becoming part of something else feels like. Not losing who you were, but learning a new way to carry it. The seasons pass quietly now. You don't mark time by the old calendar anymore. No saints' feast days, no Sunday bell. Instead, you mark it by seal migrations. The return of the sun after months of dark, the thinning of the ice. It's less precise, but maybe more honest. In this new rhythm, you're less visitor and more shadow. You learn the winds by their scent, not by script. You can tell who's approaching by the crunch of snow under their feet. You don't speak much, not because you don't know the words, but because fewer are needed. Your hands grow calloused in different ways now. You stretch seal hide over a kayak frame, your palms tugging the sinew tight. You grind berries for pigment, staining your fingertips in shades of rust and dusk. You fish not with a hook, but with a hand-thrown dart. You miss, then hit, then miss again. And that's the point. Not perfection, just motion. There's an old woman who hums while she carves soapstone. You sit beside her sometimes. You don't ask questions. But one day she hands you a small amulet carved like a spiral. No explanation. Just presses it into your palm and walks away. You keep it in your pouch with a scrap of faded linen from your old tunic. Just enough to remember. Because you haven't forgotten. Not really. Sometimes in dreams you walk through your old hall, the longhouse with its sagging beams, the carved post at the threshold, the hearth cold now filled with drifted snow. You see your mother's hands shelling barley, your father mending a broken belt, a cousin with a half-braided beard snoring in the corner. You wake to find your fingers curled in the snow. Historians still argue whether the Norse colonies vanished due to famine, economic collapse, or cultural absorption. Some lean toward climate change, the Little Ice Age gripping the land in icy teeth. Others blame trade routes shifting or the plague's distant whisper. But maybe it wasn't just one thing. Maybe it was the slow accumulation of losses. 1,000 small erasures, one fork left uncarved, one story left untold. You see it now in the abandoned farms. You visit one on a journey south, a ruin swallowed by moss and time. The roof collapsed, the walls half standing like teeth in a sleeping mouth. You step over what was once a doorstep and feel a tremor in your gut. Recognition. Inside, there's a broken loom, a rusted cauldron, a bit of wall painting faded red on white plaster, a circle, a tree, a bird. You run your hand across the stones and find a carved name nearly worn away. You whisper it aloud, and it tastes familiar. Who lived here? Why did they leave? Or didn't they? Maybe they just stopped. One winter too long. One harvest too thin. One child who didn't wake up. Maybe they stayed as long as they could. Maybe you're the echo they left behind. You camp nearby that night under stars more silent than usual. And in the dark, you light a fire the old way, flint tinder patience. You place a rock at each corner of your bedroll. You sing a verse you haven't heard in months. And you feel it again, that thrum, that sense that time is layered like driftwood on a beach, that you are not just you. You are someone's memory, someone's maybe. In the morning, you find footprints, not yours, not recent, bare toes pressed into thawed mud, small, delicate, and gone. You don't follow, you just nod. Another sign, maybe, or a story too shy to tell itself fully. You return north with a bundle of driftwood, trade it for dried meat and seal oil. A child runs up to you with a carved gull and asks if you remember how to say snowfall in your old tongue. You do? You say it? You say it twice. The child laughs. You realize your accent has changed. You say another word, and it stumbles. Your tongue fumbles the sounds. It's not a loss, it's just something new. You take the spiral amulet from your pouch and rub your thumb along the groove. It's worn smooth now, like your memory, like a stone passed hand to hand until all the sharpness is gone, but the shape remains. Later, you sit by the sea. Icebergs drift far beyond the inlet, their silence grander than anything you've known. You press your palm against the frozen ground and feel its pulse. Somewhere beneath the snow, the ruins of Gardar sleep the great Norse cathedral, its bones still upright windows like empty eyes gazing skyward. Once it rang with Latin chant. Now it's filled with wind. But even wind remembers how to sing. You hum something low, something wordless, something old. Not to remember, but to stay remembered. You rise the next morning with frost in your eyebrows and a calm in your bones. The day stretches ahead, and though there's no schedule, no bell, no priest to mark the hours, you know it's time for the long walk. Southward, along the ice-fringed coastline, where the sea grumbles in its sleep and the stones whisper names you don't know anymore. Your pack is light, your steps are slow, but there's purpose in each one. You're not the only one walking. Now and then, you pass a seal hunter dragging a sled, a woman carrying dried fish in a woven basket, a boy balancing a carved bone bird on the tip of his finger, as he skips along the shoreline, humming something that doesn't belong to any language you know. You nod. They nod back. No one says much, but they all know where you're going. To the old place. Not a single place, really more like a scattering of echoes. The ruins of Brattahlid, where Eric the Red once ruled. The bones of walls and hearths. The ghost shadow of a farm. The turf long reclaimed by grass and goatweed. But you can feel it, like a breath still held in the earth. You reach it, just as the clouds begin to gather low gray heavy, with that muffled hush that often comes before a snow squall. You pull your cloak tighter, but you don't turn back. There, rising just above the lichen-covered stones, are the ribs of a longhouse, not rebuilt, not preserved, just waiting. You step into the threshold. No door remains, but you pause anyway. Out of respect. Or instinct. Inside, the wind swirls gently as if brushing the dust with unseen hands. There's a stone bench half collapsed, and what might have once been a central hearth, ringed by blackened rock. You kneel beside it and touch one of the stones. It's cold. Of course it is, but your fingers linger. This was someone's home. Maybe yours. Maybe not. Maybe you're just borrowing the memory for a moment. You sit. You can almost hear it. The sizzle of fat in a pan. The creak of beams under snow. The quiet murmur of evening prayers or gossip. The scraping of spoons. The bark of a dog just outside. But those sounds are centuries gone now. All that remains is the shape they left. You take out the little amulet, the spiral. You place it on the hearthstone, just for a moment, just to let it rest in the place where fire once lived. Somewhere behind you, the snow begins to fall. Quiet. Slow. No storm, just a curtain of softness drifting down like ash. Historians still argue whether the Norse knew the end was coming. Whether they planned to leave or simply faded into their surroundings. Some suggest mass migration back to Iceland or Norway. Others propose they died where they stood stubborn and proud. A few fringe theories even insist they sailed west and found new land lost again to time. But maybe it wasn't an end. Maybe it was a becoming. You lift your eyes to the slope beyond the ruins. A narrow trail, one you've never walked, winds into the distance edged by low shrubs and the faint tracks of an Arctic fox. You rise, stretch your knees, brush the snow from your shoulders. You don't take the amulet back. You leave it there. It's part of the place now. And you are part of something else. Back down the trail, the village awaits your new one. The one with sealskin tents and songs that echo in the snow. You think of the boy and his bone bird. The woman with the thyme-scented soap. The way people gather at dusk, not because they must, but because they want to share warmth-fish laughter. You are not what you were, but you are still here. And that matters. You pass a rock painted with ochre, just a smear really, but you pause and press your palm beside it. Your handprint joins dozens of others. Faint, ancient, anonymous, but together a kind of choir. A message that says, we were here. We tried. We lived. Your breath fogs in front of you. The snow thickens. Your feet crunch steadily forward. Later, you will cook something over a shared flame. You will trade salt for carved bone needles. You will hum a lullaby no one taught you, but which you somehow know. And someone will ask you about the past, not directly, but sideways. A glance, a gesture, a question without words. You will answer without speaking, because now you carry the past differently, not as a weight, but as a thread. And threads can be woven. They can bind. They can become new cloth. The wind picks up again as you return to the village, your village now, though it still feels borrowed. The snow light at first has thickened into a fine curtain, not heavy enough to trouble you, but enough to soften the edges of everything. The rocks blur. The paths fade. Even the mountains in the distance become ghostly outlines, like memories too old to hold their shape. You reach the cluster of homes just as a new fire is being lit. A curl of smoke lifts from a low-roofed house with sealskin stretched over its frame. A child stands outside, holding a bowl of fish broth too big for their hands. You give a nod. They blink at you, then disappear inside without a word. You set your pack down beside the long bench at the edge of the hearth circle. This is where people gather at the end of a day when the tools are hung up and the dogs are quiet. Tonight the fire will be bright, the broth will be salty, and someone, probably the old man with the tooth like a seashell, will tell the story again. The one about the ships. They left, he says. That's what he believes. He always taps his fingers when he tells it. counting ships that no one else remembers. They left, he says, sailing into the west, where the water grows warm and the sky folds back to show the stars in strange new shapes. They took the children, the bread starter, the goats too, everything that mattered. But that's not the only version. Some say they starved, that the winters grew too long, the summers too stingy, the soil too mean, that the last bishop gave one final sermon to an empty church before locking the door and lying down beside the altar. Others whisper of plague, or pirates, or worse, of the ice itself waking of something ancient returning for its due. You sip your broth and let them talk. Because you've walked the ruins, you've touched the hearth, you felt what they left behind. It wasn't just absence, it was transformation. You wrap your cloak tighter and glance toward the edge of the village. Beyond the line of driftwood fences lies the sea, frozen now but not forever. In spring, the water will break open again. The boats will go out, the seals will surface, the fish will turn silver in the nets. Life will continue as it always does. And that's the strangest part. The Greenland Norse vanished, but Greenland didn't. It shifted. The land held its breath for a few generations, maybe. Let the grass reclaim the walls, let the snow bury the bones. But it didn't empty. The Inuit came, or perhaps were always there watching from the edges. They moved into the silence like wind into hollow stone. And now life pulses here again, quieter, but wiser. Historians still argue whether the Norse and Inuit truly met. Some say yes, there were exchanges, sightings, even shared tools. Others claim the Norse never adapted, never let go of their old ways, and so simply failed. There's even a theory that they refused to eat fish. In Greenland, refused to eat fish. Imagine that. But you're not interested in blame tonight. You're interested in warmth, in bread pulled from hot stones, in the way the fire throws light on fur and bone, and faces half lit with memory. You listen as the stories unfold like so much cloth unraveling and rewinding in gentle hands. One woman hums as she threads a line through a fresh seal pelt. Another passes you a handful of herbs to rub into your sore joints. Someone behind you begins to braid something wool maybe, or hair. The room is filled with the sound of old things made new. And outside, beneath the snow, the stones of Brattahlid remain. They do not speak. They don't need to. You finish your broth. Wipe your mouth on your sleeve. Set the bowl aside. Someone is telling a joke now, something about goats and ghosts and an empty storage room. You laugh not because it's funny, but because it's true in that strange sideways way of survival. Because this is what survival looks like. It's not always dramatic. It's not a battle or a conquest or a desperate final message carved into rock. Sometimes it's a fire, a shared meal, a story told too many times, a child chasing smoke, a basket of soap cakes that smell faintly of pine. You lean back against the post and let your eyes close for a moment. Tomorrow, you'll fish, or mend, or walk the shoreline for driftwood. But for now, you sit among people who remember different stories, some older than the stones, some made up entirely, and together you keep a kind of watch, not over the past, not even over the future, just over this moment. Because the Greenland Norse didn't vanish all at once. They faded, and in the fading, something else appeared. Not better, not worse, just next. The coals are almost gone now, just soft glimmers under ash. Around you the stories have slowed, the voices quiet. The wool braiding has turned into idle fingers, looping patterns into the fringe of someone's shawl. And outside, the snow has stopped, not cleared, but settled. It lies like sleep across the village, thick, but light muffling every sound, except the occasional creak of wood and the faintest whistle of wind through the chimney gap. You shift your weight bones a little slower than before. A deep ache in your shoulder reminds you you've spent the day moving through time, not just distance. You're not in the same place you started, and you know in that quiet deep place beneath, thought that the Greenland Norse weren't either. Not by the end. No one builds a cathedral in the middle of nowhere without believing in the future. And yet, the ruins remain. Falsy church stone walls still standing, roof, long gone floor covered in windblown moss and silence. The last recorded Norse wedding happened there in 1408. After that, the records fall away. Letters stop, ships stop. The ink runs dry, but stone stays. You can picture it clearly now. That moment, the final candle blown out, the final child lifted into a sleigh, the final sheep untethered from its post. Maybe there was no panic. Maybe it was a quiet leaving. A heavy door pulled shut, a trail of footprints vanishing behind them in the snow. Or maybe not. Historians still argue whether the Norse left willingly, were driven out by climate, or simply starved. Some favor a single catastrophic moment. Others suggest slow decay. Some whisper that the last ones were absorbed into Inuit culture, into the ice, into legend. One wild theory claims they sailed south and became the mysterious white-haired people of Mi'kmaq lore. But you're not here for answers tonight. You're here for the feeling of it. The chill of old stone, the weight of silence, the creak of history folding in on itself like a woolen cloak. You're here for the warmth of voices that tried to hold on to God, to home to each other, while everything they knew grew colder, dimmer, stranger. That's the thing about vanishing. It rarely happens all at once. You picture a girl, maybe 12 years old, standing at the edge of the fjord. Her boots are wet, her hands raw from gutting fish. She stares toward the west, toward the icy water, and asks her mother if the ships will come this year. Her mother doesn't answer right away. Not because she doesn't know, but because she does. And still she braids the girl's hair. Still they salt the cod. Still they carve runes into the doorway to ward off frost and famine. Because even as the world slips away, people keep trying. They sweep their thresholds. They bless their bread. They keep a place for the future, even when it stops knocking. The Greenland Norse built homes with turf and stone and driftwood. They traded with Europe for years. They sent ivory falcons, sheep's wool. In return, they received iron winecloth bishops. Civilization. For a while. But you can't build permanence on permafrost. And eventually the trade ships stopped coming. So they made do. Until even that wasn't enough. You close your eyes and see the last embers in someone's hearth, glowing quietly as a family prepares to move or disappear. You see the scratches left on the church wall. Not words. Just marks. As if someone didn't know what to say but still needed to say it. You take a slow breath. It's all so fragile, isn't it? Cities rise. Cultures flourish. And then, moss. But tonight you remember. You remember the stone paths that still run down to vanished harbors. The soapstone spindle whorls lost in the grass. The weathered runestones. The child's shoe found still tied. And in the remembering, they live a little longer. You tuck your hands into your sleeves, settle your shoulders and listen to the room around you. Quiet into breath and weight and warmth. Outside, the fjord sleeps. The stars press low against the earth, sharp and strange. Inside the fire whispers its last word. And you are still here, bearing witness to what was lost, to what remains, to what stories do when no one is watching. The coals are dark now. The room has stilled. No one speaks. Even the air feels like it's holding its breath. But in the hush, you find something gentle, something soft, a sense that what's finished doesn't have to be forgotten. You shift your weight, let your shoulders drop. Your eyelids grow heavier, not from exhaustion, but from the relief of rest. from the knowledge that the day has given you all it can, and now it's time to set it down. The Greenland Norse may have vanished, but they left echoes in stone and silence, in the curve of a ruin, in the shape of a prayer spoken with cold hands, in the wind that moves through empty halls like a lullaby, still trying to be heard. So, as you settle into your own quiet, let those echoes follow you, not as sorrow, but as rhythm, as the soft cadence of lives once lived of effort, once made of warmth, once kindled against great odds. Let your breath slow with the turning of the last page. The fire may be gone, but its memory glows. The story may be over, but its peace remains. Your eyes close, your mind quiets. You rest now in the soft folds of history, blanketed by mystery and soothed by time. Thank you for joining us on this journey tonight. Maybe by now you've already drifted off to sleep, and if so, we hope this story brought you peace of mind and helped you rest a little easier. Deep sleep makes life better, and we're truly happy to be part of that. Until next time, sweet dreams.